Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to this morning's webinar brought to you by Hollaroo in collaboration with the I'll say that with my own teeth back in, with the recruitment events company on building long-term relationships in early careers recruitment. So just to cover off what we're going to be talking about today, first of all, I'm going to introduce you to myself and the panel that are joining us today. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Hollaroo. We're going to talk through the different types of talent that are in early careers. Going to go through some of those stages and why early careers is different to experienced hires. We're also now then going to get into the nitty-gritty of relationship building. Why is it so important to build long-term relationships? How do you build them? And what's the impact? And then right at the end, we'll have an opportunity for a bit of a Q&A. Before I go on, just to give you a bit of housekeeping, obviously this is a webinar on Zoom. Most of us nowadays should be used to Zoom. I'd hope so over the last, after the last 6 months anyway. But if you do have a question, there is a Q&A button within your Zoom panel that you can use and submit your question there. And then we can look to answer that towards the end of the session. So hopefully you can all see my screen and the presentation that I'm sharing today. So without further ado, let's introduce everybody. So just to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Martin Redstone. I have been in the recruitment industry for the last 16 years. I work with Hollaroo as a solutions consultant, working with Hollaroo clients and Hollaroo themselves on how to provide solutions to what we're trying to do here. I'm just going to unmute my panel and hopefully they are online and able to introduce themselves. Sarah, why don't you go first?
Hi everyone, so I'm Sarah Harte. So I actually joined Dentons in January as Graduate Recruitment and Development Manager. I've been in the early talent space for too long to say. Basically, I oversee the whole early talent life cycle. So obviously everything from attraction, so when you meet the students on campus, to obviously when they join the programme, as well as when they come off the programme as well. So we also, our team, look after development. So it's very much sort of one-stop shop really of everything to do with early talent. And yeah, we're basically probably here because we've worked with Hollaroo with regards to our Challengers Welcome future trainee portal. So I'm pleased to just basically be part of this webinar really. So yeah.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you so much for joining us today. Ben, over to you.
Hello, good morning everyone. So I'm Ben Rubery. I've been at Capgemini for 8 years and I've spent the last 5 years looking after our apprenticeship programs at Capgemini. So essentially making sure all of our apprentices are having the best possible time whilst they're on programme, but working with each of our individual business areas to develop the skills that they're looking to build through apprenticeship programs. And for those of you who haven't heard of Capgemini before, we are a global organisation, around 270,000 people worldwide, and we specialise in digital transformation, technology, engineering and consulting services.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Ben. And something I didn't mention actually at the start of this is that I actually started off my professional career as an apprentice when I was 17 years old, which was many, many years ago. So this is a subject that I'm really passionate about because it's how I came into the world of work myself originally.
I also joined Capgemini as an apprentice.
Oh, wow. Well, there you go. Proof is in the pudding. So let's move on. So very briefly, just going to talk about Hollaroo. For those who have joined us on the call that may not have heard of Hollaroo before. So Hollaroo, just to be very, very top line, we are an active communication network that builds lifelong relationships with your talent communities. Now we do that by providing private social networks, probably for the best way of explaining it, that provide active communication opportunities with colleagues, with talent pipelines, and other such people through the sharing of messaging, sharing of content, and just being able to build a really great space for people to be able to build those relationships. There's various types of talent that we help organisations engage with and communicate with. You can see some of those examples on the board, on the on the screen here. First one is Hollaroo Engage. That's our talent pipelining product. Hollaroo Refer, obviously helping people with referrals in a very GDPR compliant fashion. Hollaroo Alumni, helping organisations keep in touch with their alumni. And Hollaroo On Board, helping organisations onboard new members of staff into the organisation. And finally, Hollaroo Reboard, which is our latest addition to the suite, which is obviously helping people nowadays with getting people back off of furlough and working from home, back into work and back into the office, if that's where people are going to. So I don't want to go on too long about that. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the webinar, but contact details will be available at the end of the session. So obviously the first thing we need to think about when it comes to early careers is the different types of talent that that you may have engaging in your recruitment processes. Now, what we've done here is try and lay out the four obvious ones, which are apprentices, interns, industrial placements, and graduates. However, there are lots and lots of different ways that people call these, lots of different types and versions. Sarah, I know within the world of law and law companies, legal organisations, that sometimes you call your candidates different things. Talk to us a little bit more about the differences there.
Yeah, sure. So our graduates we call trainees. So basically they are training to be solicitors. So trainee solicitor is usually what we refer to them as. So we recruit around 40 trainees on an annual basis. We have about 80 in the building in the UK at one time, and we also have future trainees who we basically put through law school. So they obviously have to get qualified before they join us. So that means obviously we've got lots of cohorts of population. We've got the future trainees, we've got the trainees. So that's probably the main one on the graduate side. With regards to interns, we call them vacation scheme students as well, just to be completely different as well. So obviously they are the same as interns. They join us during their when they can in their kind of courses, or if they have graduated after that. So for us, it's a bit more shorter term than I think with other organisations. So when I worked in other industries like accounting and banking, you could have your interns there for up to 8 to 10 weeks. But for us, it's only 2 weeks basically with regards to that. And this year as well, with obviously doing everything virtual, we've even shortened that further to 1 week. With regards to the interns that we've had within us. We also have apprentices as well. We call them solicitor apprentices, so not so different, but we don't currently have industrial placement. So that's a bit around what we currently do and what we use as kind of terminology in the law.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Sarah. And Ben, do you refer to your early careers talents as anything different to what's up here? Have we lost Ben? He seems very stuck. We may have lost Ben, unfortunately. I'm sure he'll
I'm back. Can you hear me?
You're back. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, you froze at the crucial point of your question, but I'm going to presume that you asked me about our current population at Capgemini.
Yeah, and whether or not you refer to talent in any different way to what's up here as well.
Okay, so I think we for the sort of roles that are on the screen at the minute, these are very much early careers, part of our early careers population. So graduates and apprentices make up the majority of that for us. So currently got over 300 apprentices on programme, 300 graduates on programme. We recruit typically 100 apprentices every year, and 200 graduates every year as well. Our interns, industrial placements, so we do offer those opportunities. Our IPs tend to be across a 12-month period, and we do summer placements as well for our interns. And actually, I think just in terms of, to give you a sense of some scale, so in 2019, in terms of our recruitment, about 26% of that was made up of early careers talent.
Fantastic, really interesting. So so pretty big numbers there. So is that just UK and Ireland with those kind of numbers?
Yeah, so across the UK, and specifically, obviously, apprentices are a little bit more close to my heart. So we run currently 19 different apprenticeship standards frameworks across our UK business, and that's across 11 different providers in England, Scotland, and Wales.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the stages of recruitment within early careers. So we're going to start looking at the, I suppose, the differences at some point soon between early careers and experienced hires. But obviously, we've called out five different stages within the process. From our perspective, and Sarah, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong here, but normally recruitment operations tends to finish around the induction point where it's handed over to L&D functions. Sometimes that's a bit different. But one thing that always stands out to me is the massive timeframes between some of these stages, because really the recruitment process, or the entire life cycle of this process, tends to last almost a year. Is that what we see in your experience as well, Ben, especially with apprentices? It's very, very early careers a lot of the time. So what do you tend to see in terms of the stages, and which are the pieces that jump out as probably sometimes the most challenging parts of those stages?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So I think in terms of early careers, there is that much longer lead time. I think, looking at things like results day that we've just gone through as well, and those sorts of cycles definitely feed into that. So I think you mentioned 12 months there. I think that's fairly accurate. Sometimes it can be beyond 12 months. I think in terms of probably the most challenging parts of that are probably around that offer stage onboarding period, where there is those key form exercises. So they've had that initial touch point with assessment centres and having their offer made, and sometimes that could be 6 months until their actual start date and their induction. So the challenge is definitely around that middle part, in terms of how we keep people engaged, how we keep them excited about wanting to join the organisation, and finding out more about Capgemini. So I think that's definitely the sticky bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raised some interesting points that we'll talk about as well in a little bit. But Sarah, how about you? What are you seeing in the stages? How is it? How do those stages tend to pan out within Dentons, and where do you see challenges arising within those stages?
Yeah, so it can be extremely long. So with regards to marketing and attraction, so obviously going out to schools and that sort of stuff can be very, very early. Actually, before you then sort of reap the benefits of seeing that candidate actually go through the process, because they might decide to go to university, or they might decide to do an apprentice with us, or it is very much. It does vary, so it can be kind of a bit of a long game, really. And it's also that relationship with parents a lot of the time when it comes to going to schools, and so it can be quite diverse with regards to the marketing and attraction and keeping those relationships. I'd agree, obviously once they've applied, you can be relatively sort of straightforward with regards to timelines and communicating that out, and obviously offering when those decisions are made. I agree around the onboarding. In law, we are unique, I believe, in that we have to obviously get everybody trained before with the LPC and GDL before joining. So that can mean a average gap of 2 years before they actually set foot in the building, or virtually, as they will be doing. So obviously that's a very long period of time, and often we also see those who might want to defer a year as well. So that's obviously 3 years of onboarding and keeping them engaged, and it's quite a long time to from meeting these individuals, so that they keep understanding around what the firm's about, what they should be kind of the expectations around a role, and that sort of stuff. So I think that's probably the challenges there around the onboarding period. There's certainly an opportunity with the large amount of time, but it is you always have, quite big populations that you're keeping in touch with on an annual basis, really, before they, do their virtual induction or otherwise induction.
Absolutely, and actually that's a good little segue into a conversation point that Ben brought up in his and yourself, Sarah, is that obviously there's been a lot of challenges over the last 6 months, just in general in the population, but I think none so much really affecting early careers recruitment and the people that are going through the process. It'd be interesting just to hear really from both of you what the impact has been on that process, and from number one, from changing everything over to kind of remote first processes, but also obviously with the recent issues, should we say, around exam results and gradings and what have you. What have you guys seen in terms of that impact on your processes, and also the impact on the people that are going through the processes? Maybe Ben, might be worth starting with you on that.
Yeah, sure. I think we were quite quick to react. I think initially, thinking back to March, which seems like a lifetime ago now. So we run inductions for early careers. Probably about 5 or 6 times a year we have intakes, but in the experienced hire space, that's every 2 weeks. So we were able to learn quite a bit from what they've been able to do to convert what is a face-to-face delivery of induction into a virtual environment. And we actually ran our first virtual delivery of induction for early careers last month in July, and it went actually beyond our expectations. I think the delegates themselves were, they've obviously had their own stresses, so I think they were more than happy to be on board and engage with us. I think they surprised us in the sense that they were more than happy to communicate over a virtual setting, presumably because they've had that many quizzes and things and socials that they've been used to having that sort of connection. I think the difficulty for us internally was we had to look at our processes across the board and pretty much start from scratch. So logistically, how do we get kit out to people, laptops, phones, etc.? How do we make sure we've got the technology that can cater to the needs of delivering a virtual event? So for our early careers space, usually our face-to-face induction is a week-long residential. So converting that into a virtual setting meant that we were streamlining content. We wanted to keep that same feel of induction where people are making connections with each other, having some fun along the way. You mentioned recent issues with A-level results. That has been challenging, let's say. But again, I think on reflection, I'm quite proud about the fact that we were able to react really quickly. So we were able to send out communications relatively quickly, reassure our new joiners and our candidates, and work very closely, particularly obviously in the apprenticeship space, with our training provider partners to make sure that was, particularly on the communication side of things, that was fluid and flowing as much as we can.
Fantastic. It's I think it's been a challenge for everybody, and it's good to hear that you've been very quick to react in all areas. So how about Dentons? What's been the impact on the process at Dentons?
Yeah, so similar sort of themes there with regards to obviously having to be very agile with obviously every stage of the early careers process to ensure that is positioned appropriately virtually, so making sure that it does what we need it to do and does to display kind of our culture and kind of maximizing on the opportunities for doing things virtual as well. There's lots of opportunities and avenues to explore by making that possible. Obviously it's going to be really interesting around the coming event season, around what we're going to be doing from a virtual perspective, but you can be so creative, I think, with regards to that, and we're quite excited to see sort of and be a little bit maybe radical in some areas around getting the brand out there and sort of showcasing our firm. assessments as well. You know, I think it really put everything under sort of a magnifying glass around, okay, how can we be more efficient and make sure we focus on candidate experience. And I think, you know, when it comes to doing our virtual assessments and that sort of side, I think we did spend a lot of time analysing everything and doing a bit of a pre-mortem around what could go wrong. I think probably overdid it slightly, and actually, you know, didn't need as many sort of in the way of sort of safety nets and that sort of side. But it was a really interesting sort of transition, and actually, you know, we might sort of continue, you know, on kind of exploring certain avenues in that. I guess as well on the onboarding side, we're obviously actively in communication with our future trainees anyway, but it really made us realise we need to be doing more around the contact. So we basically organised drop-in calls on a monthly basis, so they could come and sort of discuss if there's any, you know, concerns, that sort of side, so we could keep up to date with what was going on in their world and also their expectations. And that was really positively received, because obviously normally we would have them in for, you know, events maybe, you know, once or twice a year, and obviously they get a lot of communication and that sort of side. But actually to have that drop-in calls, they've joined us actually this week on their virtual induction, and they've really, it's been a, you know, really interesting kind of to hear their feedback around, you know, the challenges that they faced. And how they've really appreciated the active communication. I don't think you can communicate enough in these types of circumstances, and also just, you know, it's always a challenging period, isn't it? You know, a time obviously going through, for some people, through into their 20s and that sort of side. There's things that come up anyway, but I think this really has sort of meant that we've had to be sort of a bit more kind of in close contact with our futures. And we also, which obviously probably come on to a bit later, is around the platform that we used to, you know, with Hollaroo, to really sort of build that community so that they can get to know each other better, and we can share the latest information, they can hear the latest news, instead of obviously hearing that you know, via the media and not really knowing what's going on and not knowing how to sort of respond to their friends when they ask them what's going on. So, you know, I think there was a lot of energy behind our kind of early talent and making sure that it sort of was fit for purpose in these times. And you know, again, you know, we've been actively in communication with our, you know, apprentices around the times, and we don't have as huge a scale as Ben does, so we can afford to have kind of, you know, really quite close bonds with them all, and really sort of hear their personal circumstances. But we're really mindful of the situation. It has had a variety of impacts and will have a knock-on effect with early talent going forward. So it's really important that we kind of have that listening avenue for students and our future hires.
I would just echo some of that as well. So I think particularly the points you made around sort of assessment centre stages. So we're running virtual assessment centres. That virtual sort of engagement with schools and parents is really important. And I think just thinking about, you know, as is the case with us all at the minute, we're all learning, but also thinking about how we take this forwards. There's definitely some learns where, you know, we would have never even dreamed of delivering an assessment centre in a virtual environment before. But I think I mentioned very briefly before, candidates have been really receptive to it, hiring managers are receptive to it, and I think that has definitely sparked some conversations about how we operate sort of moving forwards as well.
Yeah, it's from what I hear from a lot of people, obviously this has been a huge driver for the digitalisation of a lot of processes, is an opportunity to review what you do and how you do it. And something we'll get onto a little bit later, though, is the possible differences between how talent within the early careers processes are comfortably moving into a digital process compared to maybe other types of talent and other generations as well. Certainly some differences that we've seen here at Hollaroo. So thank you for that both. That's really, really interesting. Obviously just mentioned it, but it'd be useful to start thinking about, especially for some of our attendees and people, there's a lot of organisations out there don't separate out a lot of the time talent acquisition and recruitment between experienced hires and early careers, because it might be a smaller organisation or they just have a smaller team. And sometimes I think that might be a bit difficult to move from experienced hire into early careers recruitment, or vice versa. So I thought it'd be quite a useful opportunity just for a few minutes, just to start calling out maybe some of the differences between early careers and experienced hires. You know, whether it be people, whether it be process, or whether it be something else that you might have noticed within your experience as well. Sarah, would you like to start us off on this one, really?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's more, and the conversations we're constantly having with our assessors, is that it's recruiting for potential versus obviously looking at experiences to kind of inform those decisions there. And often with that, because obviously, you know, you're not necessarily needing experience, you are dealing with, you know, a lot with regards to higher volumes, and, you know, you are able to target individuals regardless of background, so you can do more in kind of maybe more in the inclusivity sort of point, to build up that from a strategic point of view within the firm as well. And it's not just students as well. I think that's the common kind of view, is that, you know, it's only those graduates or school leavers or that sort of side. You know, in law we see a lot of career changes, and we really appreciate that mindset that they come and they bring to the table, really, because, you know, anyone can come into you know, a kind of graduate program or apprentice program at, you know, any point in their life. So it's very much around just ensuring that the people that you're bringing in want that growth, and, you know, you basically have a bit of you usually have a development program to support them, so that they can become kind of well-rounded overall. So that's probably one area to kind of view.
Yeah, and that's a really, really interesting point, actually, that a lot of people forget, is that early careers doesn't always mean school leavers, graduates. It can mean people who are transitioning in their career, and that's a really good point to make there, Sarah, actually, because I think a lot of the time that's forgotten about. And like you said, that brings with it some really interesting opportunities for potentially for cohorts to learn off of other people's experiences as well. And to have different types of people coming into the process. Really, really interesting point. Thanks for making that point. Ben, how about you? What do you see in terms of differences in the processes and people?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out for me is that it's more of a handheld process. I think very much hand holding along the way. So, you know, thinking about traditional early careers, those fresh out of university, school, college, you know, this is their first job, or proper sort of job. On the apprentice side of things, again, they've got their studies to be thinking about. I guess for our graduates, very competitive environment, looking at how, you know, in this case, you know, Capgemini can support them with their development needs, etc. So I think because that process of joining a new organisation and, you know, going through an interview process is very new to those people, it's very much more hand-holdy. I think what helps with that is the things that we've touched on previously. So, you know, increased communication, being really clear about what our next steps are, etc. I think looking at process as well, we touched on earlier about sort of keep warm activities and making sure that we're engaging with our people. I think early careers are definitely more receptive to that. And maybe that's more of a generational thing. Maybe it's because of the impact of social media, particularly in a virtual environment. You know, I see that this population as being more receptive to making those connections and networking with people in more of a, you know, virtual setting, if you like. So yeah, I see it very much as sort of rolling out the red carpet a little bit and making sure that communication's on point for particularly early careers.
Absolutely, that makes perfect sense. And actually, something that's quite interesting that I think worthwhile raising, especially in the apprentice side of things, is and for me, this was very much true when I was going through the recruitment process as an apprentice. But I hear it more and more nowadays when I talk to other people. I recently heard a presentation about army recruitment, actually, and something that stood out was thinking more about the people that are around the applicant and the candidate, as well as influencers. So when I was going through the recruitment process as an apprentice, I was 16, 17 years old at the time going through that process, and the organisation were very keen on involving my parents in that decision process as well, because it is a big decision for somebody who's moving from one stage of their life to another, from education into the world of work. And the same again, when I heard a recent presentation about army recruitment, is that there's a lot of drive to make sure that there's the people around the applicants, family members and friends, and getting good advice in life from them as well, and impacting on those relationships. Is that something that happens at Capgemini? What's the thought process there?
Yeah, absolutely. It is not unusual for me in my role to be talking to parents, and I guess when I took this role on, that's something that surprised me a little bit. So I think something that we do to help with that. So we hold insight evenings, so those insight events. In normal circumstances, we invite people into our offices, so prospective apprentices and their parents, and sometimes we have separate sessions. We'll talk to them, separately about some of the concerns that we have, and I think it's really understandable, because of course parents want the best for their child. Usually, what comes from the parents is, the apprenticeship proposition sounds great, but what's the catch?
Oh, we've lost Ben for a few seconds. I think that he was saying, what's the catch for if it's this good, there must be something going. There must be something else that they need to look at. So, we lost you there for a few minutes, Ben. We got to what's the catch, and that was about it. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention there?
I'm so sorry. This is the joys of working from home, right?
We're all used to it. Absolutely, yeah.
So I think where I was going with that is that majority of parents usually ask the question, what is the catch, particularly around apprenticeship programs, because they see that, individuals getting a free degree, they're going to be debt free, they've got some full-time work with that guaranteed. So I think it's really important for us to engage in that sense. Our insight evenings have moved into a virtual setting, so very much like this, we'll host a panel. We see the value very much so in getting our current apprentices and graduates involved with that. So they will do the majority of the talking. They can sell the programme and the benefits, and they can talk from their own personal experience of any challenges that they may have overcome along the way. But what we've built into that as well is getting some of the parents from our current population involved in those panels as well. And that really works well.
That's great. That's good to hear. So how about Dentons? Is that something that you take into consideration during your processes?
Yeah, definitely. For probably for apprentices, it makes the most amount of sense. We do still on trainees have calls from parents and grandparents, wanting to know, sort of explore more around what the opportunities are and that sort of side. But no, it definitely is a really key population. And for us, the solicitor apprentice is 6 years. I'm not sure how it is for you, Ben, but it's a really long commitment to get into the law. So I completely understand it from a parent point of view. They're kind of thinking, gosh, what happens if they don't like it and they change their mind, or that sort of side, and just want to sort of test that kind of motivation, really, just to make sure it is the right call for their child, really. Yeah, we do various events, and obviously we are very accessible, because when it comes to the selection process, and parents can come along, and that sort of side. So we do try and make it as accessible as possible, because we appreciate that they are very much involved in decision making.
That's great, and obviously for me that potentially is a bit of a key difference between early careers recruitment and experienced hire recruitment, is that a lot of the time in early careers, obviously we've talked about career transition as a type of talent, but a lot of the time, probably the majority of the time, this is going to be one of the first serious moves from education into the world of work. So obviously having that support network around you as an applicant is extremely important. I don't think over the last dozens and dozens of years since I've been out of the early careers kind of piece, in terms of a person in my career, I don't think I've once had my parents involved in my recruitment process since then. So I think that's actually quite a key discussion point, and something to remain very aware of, is that there are people around that person, that applicant, who are supporting them in that decision making process as well. So thanks both for going deep into that process. So as the final real talking point, I thought, this is the title of the webinar is Building Long-Term Relationships. So what I really wanted to focus on here was why do we build those long-term relationships? What is the impact of building a long-term relationship with early careers talent? And not only why, but what is the impact, but how have you built those long-term relationships? So Sarah, it'd be worthwhile, well, actually, no, can we go to Ben first, actually, because one of the interesting things is, obviously, you started off life at Capgemini as an apprentice, and you've stayed there for several years now. In fact, moving into managing the apprenticeship scheme within Capgemini. So it might be worthwhile talking to you first about why we build long-term relationships, what the impact is for Capgemini and for your early careers talent, and how you've gone about doing that.
Okay, yeah, I'm just thinking back there to when I first joined Capgemini, which seems like yesterday, actually. I think I touched on this earlier as well. So I think it is about that red carpet experience, because those experiences are what has the impact, and that's what people are going to remember. So I remember, my interview and assessment centre like it was yesterday, purely on the basis because it wasn't something like I'd been to before. It was quite informal, actually. It was very chatty. Had access to current apprentices to speak to. Didn't seem like anything was being hidden from me, and I think that was what's really resonated with me. I think thinking about my current role now, it's for me, and again, I know I focus quite a lot on the apprentice side of things, but our program is 4.5 years long, so it's really important for me to build that rapport with our new joiners and our apprentices, because they're going to be with me for 4.5 years. But seeing them on that journey from their induction, from day one, all the way through to 4.5 years mark, and they're graduating, they're in the cap and gown and they've got that certificate in the hand, that's what's really worthwhile. So how we build that experience from the offset is, I think, a lot to do with our onboarding processes and our induction. So we have a 3-step induction process at Capgemini, and it starts prior to them joining with the platform that we run through Hollaroo. So we call this Be Ready. So through the Hollaroo platform, they're able to start building those connections prior to joining. What I find, by the time that they've joined us, this population have already got a WhatsApp group on the go. They're already talking to each other, and like that's my hard work done. That, you know, as long as they've got those connections with each other and they've formed a strong cohort, brilliant. And the fact that that's happening before they join, even better. We then have the second step, which is our Be Inspired induction, which is all around, you know, as you can imagine, you know, finding out more about Capgemini, our culture, etc. But also for our apprentices, we do a lot of work with them around how to be a good corporate citizen. And for our graduates, they go on to a training course around collaboration and working together as part of a team. And I think, again, that's really important for us because those sorts of skills will carry with them throughout their program, and we do touch back on those skills as they go through the program. So that induction experience is something that stays with them throughout the duration of their program. It's not just a tick box exercise for us. And I think for me, what's the most important thing there, again, I've touched on this, but for them to be able to develop connections with each other and relationships. The stuff around Capgemini and our culture, that's great. If that doesn't land, we can do that at a later date, but as long as they've got those connections, that's even better. And then to just reinforce that, the third and final step of our induction process is a post-joining platform that we host internally. And that has everything that they need for their first 30 days within Capgemini. So all of the processes that, you know, are quite boring, you know, you've got the admin processes, the paperwork that needs to be filled out as part of onboarding. That's all in one place for people, along with some useful links. And I think that whole experience, you know, I you know, seeing apprentices at graduation, they come up to me and talk about, oh, I loved induction, I would love to go through induction again, and that's 4.5 years later. And I think those sorts of experiences are crucial to making sure that you build those longer term relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as an impact of that, do you know what the longevity of people who come through the early careers programs is within Capgemini? Do people stay there for longer than the average experienced hire? What happens?
Yeah, they do. I think it's really impressive, actually. So I think the grads and apprentices, they see the commitment that we've made to them. And I think, again, for them to see that commitment helps to build those relationships. They're giving something back to us as well. So our retention rate across graduates and apprentices is a lot higher than our experienced hire population. That's something that I'm really proud of. So yeah, we do see the value in that more upfront exercise of making that experience the best it possibly can be, because, you know, by the time they get 5 years down the line, they're still with us.
That's fantastic. That's really, really good to hear. Just shows that putting the investment in up front in terms of building that relationship can really impact in terms of the average tenure and longevity of a member of staff. It's really, really interesting. Sarah, how about on your side of things? You mentioned earlier on that sometimes you have to start relationships with people, sometimes years before they start at Dentons. So from your perspective, what's the, how do you build those relationships from such an early stage? And what's the impact within Dentons, both for the business and for the talent, on building those relationships?
Yeah, I think it kind of does follow a lot of the points that Ben made around trying to make it memorable as possible. You know, everyone remembers their first job offer, or, you know, someone gives you that chance. You know, it's really exciting, and it's just trying to maintain that level of excitement throughout the whole duration, and also just ensuring that there isn't misalignments with that, because I think, you know, there is obviously, you know, skepticism around with certain students, but, you know, there you know, lots of really exciting marketing campaigns that, you know, promise very similar things, and actually you've got to make sure that it is honest and authentic, and that's something that this population, you know, really are looking for. Just to, you know, because they worry that, you know, this commitment, given the long amount of time that they're waiting to join, you know, might not necessarily pay off for them. So it's really important to kind of give proof and evidence to why you are saying what you're saying, and what you're doing. They're very much kind of looking for that. So with regards to our process, we throughout the selection process do a lot of coaching calls following obviously attendance assessment centres and that sort of side, even if they are successful, because there's always room for development. We want them to sort of continue on that development journey, so that given there's quite a bit of time, they can really sort of put those in the forefront and really think to work on them. And also it's so important from a self-awareness point of view that they know where they need to sort of really be focusing as an individual. They're also very keen to be treated as an individual, so that kind of attention and personalised feedback is really, really valued. The offer process, we try also to make that as memorable as we can by offering as much congratulations. Our assessor team are very active in giving them a call or sending them emails, to obviously mark that momentous occasion when that kind of all comes through. And then following obviously their offer, we have the digital support of Hollaroo with the Challengers Welcome platform that has all the information that they need. It helps them with practical things like the seats and how does that work. Also, because we're very regulated in law, it's important that they are aware of what the expectations are there. And I think it's great to be sort of quite upfront around what is expected, so that they don't answer surprised when they join us day one for their kind of virtual induction. And also I think as well, there's a huge point around making the team accessible. So on the Hollaroo platform, we've got our team doing all sorts of silly things in photos and stuff, just to show that we are human, and that they can approach us if there's something that they need to chat through. We are very aware that this is really challenging times at the moment, and from a mental health point of view, we really want to have those conversations with individuals and make them feel that they shouldn't bottle up and feel that they need to be perfect and that sort of side. That's very much not how we want things to be. So it's being kind of accessible, it's being authentic, it's managing those expectations through digital means, through Hollaroo, which really helped us this year. And also we've managed to put a lot on the Hollaroo platform around our seat planning process, so actually the surveys and things like that. So instead of relying on emails, our team now questions ourselves around, okay, let's just put it all on Hollaroo. There's everything for everyone. And even if the 2020 cohort, it's only relevant for them, the 2021 and the 2022 and the 2023 cohort can all see it. It's all transparent, and they can also ask questions about it and kind of feel that engagement. So that's the digital platform. But then, as I said before, around making us accessible, we really felt that having drop-in calls that can take any turn and can cover any query at all has been really helpful at this time, because obviously law schools and universities have all sort of changed their approaches to learning and kind of putting their people through qualifying, and so it's so important that they have that forum and feel that they are kind of that they can chat and share with each other and create that community, because as Ben was saying, it's so important that they connect as a cohort. We're working across a lot of regions as well, and it just they're not going to be able to meet up. If we had more based in London, it'd be a very different story. So having opportunities to connect, build relationships, and no doubt there's probably a WhatsApp group, and LinkedIn and all those kind of things outside of that, but it just gives them sort of starting point so they can build on that. And yeah, it's just, so that's probably the main things for me around what we do, and obviously the induction itself. It obviously started this week with our virtual induction, and ensuring that that's has everything that they need, and also connects back to the messages that we shared very much on offer, and because relationships at the end of the day, they're so important. Lawyers, it's a relationship business. It's how they're going to be successful is that they are well-rounded with regards to that. So it's strategic importance to us as well, that they are connected, not just a cohort, but just understand the importance and the difference that makes.
Yeah, fantastic. So I've heard some really key themes coming out of both yourself, Sarah, and Ben, in terms of that why, what, and how, in terms of building those long-term relationships. And for me, it's connectivity comes out quite a lot. We've heard a few times people mentioning WhatsApp groups and people kind of creating their own their own network around their cohorts and the people around them. Communication, content, we're hearing all of this, as well as I love some of the examples that you both gave around some of the one-to-one communication as well between yourselves and others, and the different cohorts as well. I really like that example, Sarah, that you mentioned about feedback and coaching call for all of your applicants. That's a huge undertaking, but it must make such a huge difference in terms of building that relationship. So some fantastic thoughts and points and comments there. Thank you both. So the next piece of the webinar is the opportunity to answer any questions that have been asked by our attendees. We don't actually have any questions as yet, so we'll give everybody just a few seconds to pop any questions onto the Q&A button if they do have any. If not, I usually take that as it's been so informative that that everybody's got all the information they need, which is fantastic. While we're waiting for any Q&A to come through, obviously just want to take this opportunity to thank you both for being a part of today's webinar. I think there's been a lot of comment and discussion that is really, really useful and really interesting, and some things in there that I wouldn't have thought of and I wouldn't have heard before as well. And as I said right at the beginning, it's a subject that's very close to my heart, because that's how I started in the world of work many years ago. In fact, I think come September it'll be 21 years ago, so that kind of gives away how old I am. But interestingly, when we talk about long-term relationships, I'm still friends with some people that I started on the same day as an apprentice with 21 years ago. So it just goes to show, and I'm still in touch with people who at the time were my mentors and at the time were my even assessors as well. So building those long-term relationships has a huge impact on somebody's life. So we've had our first question in. The question is, in terms of marketing and attraction, how important do you think employer branding is? Do you think prospective candidates look more at the career offer or the employer themselves? Sarah, do you want to have a think about an answer to that? So in terms of marketing and attraction, how important do you think employer branding is? Do you think prospective candidates look more at the career offer or the employer themselves?
I think it's the balance. So I think what I find in it, I think is the big difference between experienced hire is that the people we're competing against from a kind of student point of view is very different. So obviously experienced hire might be competing against other similar type of firms, but actually in the early career space it's everybody. A lot of the times it can be, it might not just be law, because obviously it's people that they're meeting, at universities and schools, and particularly in apprenticeship, they can decide to do, all sorts of different career opportunities, and that's, absolutely, right. It's the right platform for them to sort of consider all options. I think so that does kind of make the difference. So obviously, clearly there is a point that the marketing and the activity at universities and the media that people are doing seems to outweigh slightly the employer's image as well. Obviously that's what kind of draws them in. So that's I always feel that when you're out on campus and giveaways and things like that we're doing, it's very much just the draw, so that they can have the conversation and then they can go and do their research around the brand and get to know the employer. Because in the day, early careers, they might not have heard of the employer before, because why would they? And unless they've got the role models in their life to say, oh, that's a great organisation to work for, you should definitely apply for them, it's not fair to expect them to. But you always, as we said before in the webinar, that there are, influences in their lives, and there are, big brands out there that, students will see and they will, apply to because of the, employer overall. But I think, it's great to show the marketing that we do in the student space around the development program that we have on offer. It's different messages really around, what we can offer them from a support point of view, what they will end up with at the end of it, and the value of that overall. So that's probably, it's not really answering it directly, but I'd say that it is really important, not just to rely on the employer brand. There's also a need in the student space to sort of, because it is so competitive. Yeah.
That's great, thanks. And Ben, how about yourself? Do you think it's the career, or do you think it's the employer that's more important?
Yeah, I think I can definitely relate to what Sarah's shared there. I think, thinking about Capgemini, not many people will have heard of Capgemini, but they will have heard of our clients. So, McDonald's, for instance. So we tend to leverage that a little bit more to bring sort of Capgemini to life to that audience. So we, if we're advertising a role of, okay, we want an SAP functional consultant, that population is not going to know what an SAP functional consultant is. So how can we, bring to life what that role is? And I mentioned earlier, utilising our existing population of graduates and apprentices. So when we're out there at careers fairs, when we're going to do events at schools, etc., those are the people that are representing Capgemini. So I think it is a balance. But how we bring that to life, thinking creatively about, how we can utilise our existing people is really important as well.
No, that's great. Thank you very much, Ben. So there aren't any other Q&A coming through. So I think that is a really good point to say thank you to both of you again, and say thank you for joining the conversation and going through your experiences and your thoughts on this subject. Also to thank you to the attendees that have come online today, and also to the recruitment events company for partnering with us on this webinar. If anybody wants to find out more, you can connect with Hollaroo at hollaroo.com, or email us at hello@hollaroo.com. This session is being recorded, so we'll send out a link to the recording afterwards. And if anybody has got any other questions specifically for Sarah or Ben, I'm sure they won't mind somebody looking them up on LinkedIn and contacting them for their thoughts. But in the meantime, thank you everybody, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.